It feels like the song is ending. It feels like the song ended. Yay! Here I am, coming to you live from a hotel room somewhere in the world. I feel so unfamiliar. I don't have the monitor in my ears. I can't hear the song. I couldn't get hyped by listening to the song, but I'll get hyped by listening to your questions. How we doing, Blunty? Blunty will be my monitor. How we doing? Is everything?
Doing good.
Oh God, everything's checking out. Good to see you guys. Good to be with you. We're gonna do some Q&A. I don't know why it's the same as ever, but something about like having my headphones on and being in my studio makes me feel comfortable, and now I feel like it's the first time I've ever done this. Nevertheless, here we go. Interesting. One thing I didn't check, Blunty, was that the pop-ups work when I click on a question. Let's try that right now. It works! Oh my God, it works. We're going to be able to do a live stream from a hotel room. That is what we're going to do here. We are going to you guys are going to ask questions. I'm going to answer questions. We're going to spend a little bit of time together doing that. And I wish I could show you guys my setup here. You wouldn't believe. I was supposed to post a picture of my setup. I've got my Stream Deck over here. I've got a little monitor for my camera right here. I've got my laptop, of course, and then on the hotel room TV, I've got my second monitor monitoring the stream. It's crazy how good it is, actually. We are going to do questions. Let's do questions. We'll start with this question from FP Avery, who asks, what is your preferred way to set up a voice alert based on flight pack voltage with EdgeTX? So there's really, I think there's really just one way to do it. Number one, you have to have telemetry working. So you have to go into the telemetry screen on the radio and discover sensors. You do that once after you've bound a receiver. You'll pick up the sensors. In Betaflight, in the receiver tab, you need to have telemetry turned on. By default, the receiver sends telemetry back to the radio, but it is only the receiver's telemetry, things like RSSI and LQ. For the flight controller to send telemetry back, you have to have telemetry enabled in the receiver tab. And battery voltage is something that the receiver doesn't know or send. The flight controller knows that. So you would have telemetry enabled in the receiver tab in Betaflight. You would have your sensors discovered in the hand controller in EdgeTX. And then once the sensors are discovered, you'll have the battery voltage sensor. Then you'll create a logical switch in EdgeTX. That logical switch will become true when the battery voltage goes below a certain value. You set what the value is. And then you will have a special function that plays the audio track, low voltage or whatever, when the logical switch becomes true. Those are the steps. And if look at this. Oh my God, so professional. If you go back and look, this video, how to make your Tyrannus read out low voltage. This is an old video from, gosh, 7 years ago. The basic steps have not changed, though. The menus will look a little bit different, especially because this is an old Tyrannus X9D, so the screen is a different shape. But the basic steps are exactly the same as they are today. I don't think anything substantial has changed if you want to follow a tutorial. So there we go. And that is how we do it. That's how we do it. Here's a question from B. Myers, who asks, do you guys have recommendations for power supplies, or do you plug your LiPo charger into a wall outlet? So asking, do you plug your LiPo charger into a wall outlet, presumes that the LiPo charger has a AC adapter, where I don't have one at hand. I thought I might have a LiPo charger nearby, but I don't. Some LiPo chargers have AC built in. So if we look at this LiPo charger, right, this is the Hoda D6 Pro, and if we look, it is an AC and DC LiPo charger. So where can we see that? I wish we could see a picture of it, like the back of it. Let me just go to images. No one has a picture of the back of it where the plug plugs in. It has a plug for an AC input, right? Same thing for the Hoda S6. It has a plug for the AC input, right? And that means it plugs into a wall. Oh, here we go. Perfect. I got it. So here, right here, we have a plug. It plugs into the wall. That means it has a power supply built in. If you have a LiPo charger that doesn't have a power supply built in, that means it can only take a DC power source. And people are kind of annoyed. It's like, what do you mean? I need a battery. Like a battery would be an example of a DC source. So you could plug the LiPo charger into a battery. You could charge another battery off a battery. And people are like, well, if I have a battery, then I don't need a charger. I'm charging a battery off a battery. I want to plug it into the wall. Of course I do. So what's the point of a LiPo charger that doesn't have a power supply built in? Well, the idea is that you need the power supply, but if you already have a power supply, then if you already have a source of DC voltage, then you don't want to pay extra for a power supply built into the charger. So it's basically just, what options do you prefer? Most of my chargers have a AC power supply built in, but I usually don't run them off of their built-in AC power supply. So if we were in my office, you would see that I have a big power supply in the green ammo can, basically on the back of the bench. It's like 1200 watt power supply, and I run all my chargers off of that. And the reason for that is that typically the power supply that is built into a charger is smaller and less powerful than the external power supply that the charger is capable of handling. So a charger might have a 200 watt built-in power supply, but it might work at 500 watts if it's running off an external power supply. And that again is just a cost and size thing. If they were to build a 500 watt power supply into the charger, it would be much bigger and more expensive. So the idea is that, well, if you just want the convenience of plugging it into the wall, you get a little bit of power supply, but if you want to do it yourself with an external power supply, you get a big one. There are chargers out there, like the ISDT K6 comes to mind, that have a big honkin' built-in, that's not what I meant to type, ISDT K6. I believe it's the K6. No, not the K6. K4? There we go, the ISDT K4. The ISDT K4 comes to mind as one with a very big internal power supply. So if we, hang on one second, let me go over here, sorry. If we go over here and drag this over, we can see it says AC 400 watts, DC 600 watts dual input mode. So it can do 400 watts off its internal power supply. That's fairly good for a built-in power supply. Right? Most of them are going to be less than that, more like 200 watts. So you just buy what you need is the short version. But most of the time, when I go on a trip like this, I won't bring a power supply. I'll just bring the D6 Pro and plug it into the wall. When I'm at home, I'll have the power supply. And then when I'm in the field, I will potentially run the charger off of my car alternator. And that is just a straight DC power source. So do I have a recommendation for a power supply? Yeah, there's various power supplies you can look for. The best case scenario, you're going to want a 24 volt instead of a 12 volt. The higher voltage is going to mean lower amps. What if we just go to like Race Quads and search for a PSU power supply? So Race Quads has sold this thing forever, and it's still reasonably priced. This is a 24 volt 400 watt power supply for 65 bucks. It is not the highest quality power supply you can get in the world. Back when Race Quads first started selling them, they basically had, and this was years ago, so I don't know if this is still true. There was a failure rate, and basically, if you bought it and it died on you, they would just send you another one because they're only paying, I don't know, they're paying 20, 30 bucks for them, or I don't know what they're paying, but But basically, it was good enough that a lot of people used it, and it got the job done. Here is a 360 watt, 15 amp, 24 volt for $30, or a 400 watt, 24 volt for $65. Seems like this 360 watt is the way to go, and that's going to be like plenty for a lot of things you would need to do. Although many chargers could exceed this, and you would want to make sure you stayed under, like, I'd give it a little bit of headroom. I'd stay under 300 watts here, or maybe 450 watts on this one. That's a good recommendation. If you want something more powerful, you can go out and find it, but you're going to spend a lot more money on it. So, all right. Here's a question from Crom in the Discord. Thank you for being a patron and for being a member of the Discord server. If you guys want to join my Discord server, you can join my Patreon, link in the video description below, to get an invite. Crom says, a friend is having DVR issues, screen scrolling to the right on the SkyZone 04X Pro with the SpeedyBee RX. Is there a solution to this? So when you have an analog feed and the screen kind of goes and scrolls to the right, that usually means that the receiver's sync lock or sync reconstruction algorithm is screwing up. What does that mean? An analog video feed is made up of frames of image data, right? You have whatever, 30 frames per second, 25 frames per second. And the way it works is that that frame is made up of individual scan lines, and when you reach the bottom of the frame, there's a thing called the sync pulse. And the sync pulse is used to indicate to the display device that we're about to start another frame. Okay? And that is how it knows to go to the top of the screen and start reading out the scan lines down the screen again. If the sync pulse is lost, what happens is that the image rolls. It rolls up the screen because the top scan line is, the display has become sort of desynchronized, and the top scan line is actually in the middle of the screen or something like that. So you can lose the whole signal if just the sync pulse gets lost. As you get further away and the signal gets weak. You can have a perfectly good video frame, but if the sync pulse gets lost, the video frame is sort of messed up because it's not centered on the screen the way it should be. So Clearview, Iftron Clearview was the first to do this that I know of, and then Clearview was super expensive because they had this proprietary tech that nobody else had. And then RapidFire came along, Immersion RC RapidFire, and they were the first kind of mainstream module that was affordable to typical pilots, and they made it in a Fat Shark form factor, whereas Iftron Clearview was a standalone box, not a module. So RapidFire was, in my opinion, sort of the first to really make this mainstream. And they figured out that if you've got, so we've got 30 frames per second, right? And that means that sync pulse is going 30 frames per second. I can't make my hand go that fast, right? But it's got a regular rhythm. And so basically, if you lock onto that rhythm and then one gets lost, you could guess where that sync pulse is supposed to be. And what RapidFire and TBS Fusion and I assume SpeedyBee are doing is they do sync pulse reconstruction. If they lock onto that sync pulse and then one is missing, the module makes a fake sync pulse that it sends to the display that then keeps the image from rolling. So if that technology is supposed to keep the image from rolling, then why is your image rolling? And the answer is that with some cameras, and this is entirely a camera-related thing because the camera generates the sync pulses, some cameras are so far outside of the NTSC specification or the PAL specification in terms of the consistency of their sync pulses or the rate of their sync pulses, that it confuses the receiver. And the receiver starts generating fake sync pulses that conflict with the camera's sync pulses, and the result is that you get this sideways scrolling, okay? So what do you do about this? Well, to some degree, this is the receiver module's fault. And to some degree, this is the camera's fault. And it's only through trial and error that you can figure out which it is. Basically, no matter how good the receiver module is, some cameras are so effed up that you will always get this scrolling issue. but with the speed, if this was a TBS Fusion or an Immersion RC Rapid Fire, I would say pretty confidently this is not the module's fault. But since the SpeedyB module is relatively new, I'm not sure how much I trust it. I'm not saying I don't trust it. I'm just saying it's an unknown. So I would want to test with a different camera and see if the issue happened. Or if I had access to a Fusion or a Rapid Fire module, I would test with that and see if the issue happened just by process of elimination. But what can you do about it? Well, in the Rapid Fire, in the Fusion, and in the SteadyView module from SkyZone, you have the option to change the diversity mode. And like SkyZone calls it diversity mix 1, 2, and 3. Rapid Fire calls it, I think it's mode 1 and 2. But there's a way that you can basically change the sensitivity of the sync reconstruction algorithm or disable it entirely. And that's what we would want to do. We would want to go into the SpeedyB menus and try and find that setting. And I don't know the SpeedyB menus off the top of my head to tell you exactly what it's called, but that's what we would want to do. But here's the problem, sort of wrapping this up. If you turn off sync reconstruction entirely, the screen rolling issue will go away. But you're also losing out on one of the features of the module that is supposed to be, you won't get the sideways screen rolling, but you will get the kind of flickering when the sync pulses are corrupted during normal sort of, I'm just too far away and I have a weak signal. So the whole point of this feature is that it makes your image more stable and you're turning it off because the combination of the camera and the module is making your image less stable. So personally, if I was in a situation like this, if I wanted the best possible analog performance, I would try and figure out whether it's my camera or my module that is causing this, and I would be tempted to try to get rid of, I mean, price being no object, obviously, I would try to get rid of the thing that was messing me up, because the best performance is going to be when sync reconstruction is enabled and then the camera and module are working together in a way that we don't get that side scrolling. Okay, great question. I love that question. That's a topic that is near and dear to my heart. There's actually a video I did a long time ago. Let me see if I can find it. I might not be able to find it. Hold on. Oh, golly. I actually... Wow. What would I search for? Oh, I can't find it. There's actually, it is literally a oscilloscope that shows what the module does to reconstruct the sync pulse. Let me try just one more time because I think you guys will be really interested to see it, but I don't want to take too long on the live stream digging around for it. If I search for TrueD, I'm going to find it. Bingo! I found it. Hey, I knew I would. Check this out.
Hey, welcome back everybody to another episode of
Okay. So my YouTube is being weird. My YouTube will not, it's pausing every time I try and play. Check this out. We'll just look at this screen grab real quick. Here is the actual output from the camera. Let me zoom in slightly. Hold on. So here's the output from the camera, and we can see that, see this here? This is the sync pulses, I think. I'm not sure. Right? And then we can see the modules generating their own sync pulses and what they do differently. You know, so if you want to go find this video, why TrueDX holds lock worse than Rapid Fire. It's a 30-minute video with a lot of insight into how these analog modules work and may help you understand what they're doing behind the scenes when you get that side scrolling. I think it's a fascinating video, but I'm not going to try to just watch the whole thing with you here on the live stream. Okay. Everything looking good, Blunty? Everything looking good, chat?
So far, so good.
Awesome, awesome. We have currently 18 questions queued up. I'm going to do super chats in just a second. I'm going to take a couple more questions from the regular chat. Thank you for posting that in the Discord, Blunty, that link. I have black lines on my analog video and the OSD disappears when I throttle up. How do I fix this? I have a capacitor and I'm powering the camera from the ELRS and VTX. So you're on the right track. Those black lines are absolutely because you are getting noise from the motors or the ESCs or both. And having a capacitor is absolutely the right way to try to solve that. Moving the camera to a different 5-volt regulator, absolutely a good way to solve that. You're doing the right stuff. OSD disappearing. OSD is disappearing because the sync pulse, which we were just talking about, the OSD needs the sync pulse to draw the OSD. And when the sync pulse gets lost, the flight controller can't draw the OSD. And so this is all right up the right alley, right? But I would wonder why it's so bad in the first place. It's like saying every time I put my weight on this foot, I have a screaming pain in my ankle, and I've tried everything. I have a splint on my ankle. I have a bandage on my ankle. I took some ibuprofen, and it's like, okay, that's cool, but why do you have a screaming pain in your ankle every time you put weight on it? Oh, there's a bone sticking out. Okay, well, we need to fix that problem. So that's the situation you're in right now. You're kind of putting Band-Aids on top of a problem, and I want to find out why the problem's happening in the first place. It shouldn't be that bad. And if it is that bad and you can fix it with Band-Aids, great, because you can at least get in the air, but we should try and solve the problem. Number one thing I would look for is, are your motor screws too long? When your motor screws are too long and they stick up above the motor base, then they can touch the motor windings or the motor wires, and a lot of times it'll just make you fry a motor, but sometimes if there's just very light contact, it doesn't make you fry the motor, but it does make horrible, horrible video noise. So that's the first thing I would look for. Is there some way that the output of the ESC is getting grounded out and it's making a lot of noise on the ground plane? That's the first thing I would check. There are other things it could be. You could have some maybe contact between the ESC and the bottom plate, but that's the kind of direction I would look for, okay? A lot of times when you have horrible, horrible noise, that it comes back to some kind of issue like that.
So Chad is a couple of different people mentioned different things. Like this wouldn't be an antenna issue, right? You wouldn't expect black lines from an antenna.
1000% no.
Fuzz. You would expect like fuzz because the black is in the signal that's there. Fuzz is you seeing it or not from the signal at the distance.
Correct. Correct. This is being injected into the video system before it gets to the video transmitter. And the other thing that's key is it starts when you arm the quad, and it is independent of distance. So if it was an antenna issue, you're right, Blunty, you would see fuzz or snow, and then it would get worse as you get further away. And also the antenna issue would not really be related to whether you were or weren't running the motors.
How do you know if a capacitor is bad? Is there a chance that the cap just, like, there's a bad cap? I hear this. I hear people ask this all the time. Like, do you think it's worth just swapping caps in a case like this?
Sure. How do you know if the cap is bad? The first thing I would do is I would do a physical inspection. It is semi-common for one of the capacitor legs to break off. Just because you solder the capacitor on, it's kind of hanging off there, and then it's kind of flapping around as you fly and crash and vibrate, and eventually one leg pops off, and you don't know, and now your capacitor isn't working at all. I don't think capacitors usually like wear out. I mean, they do eventually, but not in the typical lifespan of a quadcopter. It certainly would be worth just replacing the capacitor. Although, if it's this bad, I would think that even without the capacitor, like, it shouldn't be like this bad, right? So I'm not sure about that, but it's worth it. How would you know if the capacitor was bad? You can test the capacitor if you have a multimeter that has a capacitance function. Multimeters can measure capacitance, and you would measure the capacitance. There are other ways that a capacitor could fail that wouldn't be detected by that, but if you measure the capacitance and the capacitance is not fairly close to the nominal value, then that would be bad. It's probably simpler to just go ahead and replace the capacitor, though. Yeah, anything else?
Do you need to unsolder the capacitor to test it?
Yes, you do 100%. You can't test it, well, I never say can't. Like, someone out there who's smarter than me about electronics will chime in and say, yes, you can. But in general, you can't test a capacitor in circuit because the capacitor is in parallel with other stuff, including other capacitors. A lot of times, capacitors will be in a bank, and there will be like 10 capacitors in parallel, and their capacitance adds up, and they act basically like one big capacitor that's 10 times as big. And so if you wanted to measure the capacitance of one of those capacitors, you would need to remove it from the board to separate it from the others, because you would be measuring the capacitance of the entire bank. That's true also for your electrolytic capacitor that you've soldered to your ESC. There are lots of other capacitors on that ESC, and so you wouldn't be able to test that capacitor just by itself. All right. Let's just take a quick look. We've got a couple super chats coming in. We'll just get them the priority access that they feel like they deserve. Here's a question. Thank you for a $5 super chat from Virginia Highlands Outdoors. I bought a Tiny Trainer HD, a Hummingbird race spec, and an Acro B75. Will there be issues between the three in Betaflight because of the Newbie Drone Betaflight setup? I don't know what issues there could be in Betaflight. Like, they'll all work with your hand controller. If I had all of those birds, I would bind them all to the same hand controller. Presumably, you bought them all with Express LRS receivers, and you have an Express LRS hand controller. I would set up the aux modes the same on all of them, so that I have a consistent switch layout. The arm switch is always in the same place, the angle, the turtle mode. I would want all that to be consistent between all of my multi-rotors as much as possible. So you may need to go into Betaflight, and you may need to change those things, but there's no, like, Betaflight still works with the Newbie. What you're getting at, I think, is that Newbie Drone ships with a custom firmware. It's still Betaflight, though. It's just Newbie Drone's custom build of Betaflight. It still works with Betaflight Configurator. It works exactly as before. I do want to warn you, in case you think that you're going to get them and flash firmware to them, please don't. That Tiny Trainer HD came from 533. It's ready to go. The Newbie Drone came from Newbie Drone. It's ready to go. The Hummingbird came from Newbie Drone. It's ready to go. The Acro B came from Acro B? It's Newbie Drone 2, isn't it? Yeah. Anyway, they're all ready to go. They're not 100% ready to go, but they're mostly ready to go. Please do not just try to flash Betaflight, because you'll just wipe the configuration out. In fact, the first thing you should do when you get them is back up the CLI dump to a text file. Go to the CLI and type dump all, enter, and save that out somewhere, so that later, if you do wipe the configuration, you can get it back. And then go in and do things like bind them and change the aux modes to match your switchology, your switch layout. But don't wipe out the config.
Also, in chat they mentioned that they were wondering if the Betaflight version would be different, and that would make any difference. I believe Newbie Drone shipping on 4.5, but even if they're not, you won't see a major difference when you're doing configuration between the two. There'll be like a couple CLI commands and a couple things that might be different, but especially if you're not flashing them and they came set up and you're not going to flash them because they're good to go, then you just bind and fly and you shouldn't have any problem.
Yep. Okay, great. Scruffy FPV, thank you for £5. If it wasn't for your liftoff vids, I would have given up, so thanks. Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, it's great. I'm so glad they were helpful. I've got an Air 65 now. Any tips for flying slowly indoors? I hit the ceiling a lot. So, Scruffy, people think that like learning on a tiny whoop is easier than learning on a bigger drone. But if you're flying indoors, it absolutely is not. It is very hard to have the throttle management and precision necessary to fly indoors, because indoors it feels like you're in a great big room. It's not that big when you start flying a tiny whoop. It moves too fast. So, like, it's normal that you're struggling here. One thing you could do is in Betaflight, I should be able to do this just in virtual mode. I don't have a quadcopter here to plug into, but in Betaflight we go to the PID tuning tab. We go to the rate profile settings. Sorry, this is so zoomed out. I don't even know if you can see this. But we're going to go PID tuning rate profile. Then I'll zoom in here real quick. And we're going to set the throttle limit to scale. And we're going to set the throttle limit percent to some number less than 100. And that is going to reduce your throttle, basically. It's going to knock the top off your throttle, and it's going to make it easier for you to manage your throttle. I would suggest starting with a value of like 80% or maybe 85%. That's going to still leave you plenty of power to fly around, but just make the throttle a little more manageable. And to be honest with you, I did this when I was racing for RaceGow, the Game of Whoop racing competition. because I looked at my DVR and I looked at my throttle position, and I was going and I was racing and racing and racing, and I saw that this was an extremely tight technical track. I was never going above, I don't know, 60% throttle. It was some ridiculously low number. There were no fast straightaways for me to just zip around. So I immediately went in and I lowered my throttle scale. And it means that I don't have the option to go to full throttle. But who cares? I'm not doing that anyway. And it means that I have much better resolution on my throttle when I'm actually flying. If you're trying to learn to control your altitude better, I strongly recommend giving that a try. There are going to be people who say that we should use throttle expo. And those people argue that if I scale the throttle down, I'm knocking the top of the throttle off. But what if I did go outdoors and I want to go to full throttle? And they say what I should do is I should leave the throttle at 100%, throttle limit off, and instead I should do throttle expo. And what they recommend is you do throttle expo and then you move the midpoint down. Can I do that? You move the midpoint down. How do I do it? Is it negative throttle? I can't remember. I never do this, so I can't remember. It's not negative. No, you can't do negative. How do you freaking do it? You push that throttle mid. Have they changed how this works? Why is the throttle mid not? Yeah, it's like that. Is that it? I think that's it. I'm not sure. How do you do it? No. Am I doing? Bungie, how do you do it so that you basically knock the bottom of the throttle down, but you still have full? Is that it? I think that must be it because it's the only way to do it. Everything else pushes the midpoint up, and that's not what we want. I think is it like that? Oh, maybe it's like that. Oh, yeah. Well, shit, I'm not being very helpful. All right, I'll shut up then. Since I'm not being helpful, I'll shut up. That feels right to me. Because here, you're at 50% on the input, but you're only at like 35% on the output. So I think what you do is you leave throttle mid at 0 and you raise the throttle expo. And that gives you more precise control at the low and mid throttle, but then you can still go to full throttle. That's fine. You could try both and see which way you like it. I just prefer to keep a linear throttle and just knock the top of the throttle off myself. Because I'm not, I think I'm not using it anyway. It goes both ways. Yeah. Okay. We got a super chat here from Mr. Lorenzo. Thank you for $5, Mr. Lorenzo. I was looking at the Flyfish Volador 3 for 3.5 inch and the Avion RC Icon 3 Pro frames to downsize. What would you recommend for Bando Freestyle? Well, for Bando Freestyle, durability is our big concern. So let's look at the Flyfish Volador 3. Now that one I'm fairly familiar with. The other one is the Avion RC Icon 3. Let's look. Icon 3. Oh, that's a pre-build. You're looking at just the frame, though, right? No, you're looking at a pre-build. Interesting. Radio Master RP1, sure. Arm guards? Yeah, why not? Spare props? Nah. Spare arms? No? Can I just say no? Okay, no thanks. Spare arms? You're going to need spare arms for sure. Spare standoffs? Yeah, sure, we need those too. Let's take a look at this frame. So the question would be, is this a particularly durable frame? And I'm just looking at the thickness of the carbon fiber. To me, it doesn't look like it's designed to be particularly durable. It's got a plastic front end that's going to help protect the camera and help. It's got a little chin here to help protect it from impacts. That's nice. We got arm guards. So it's some thoughts toward durability, but like as far as like a broken arm or whatever, I guess the question would be, how much are you really concerned about breaking arms? Because as you get to the lighter weight of a 3 inch and a 3.5 inch, you're less likely to just explode something. It looks like a reasonable frame. Anybody in the chat who has actual experience with that frame, you know, if somebody could say, oh, I had one and it blew up. No, don't buy it. You know, we would take that into account. I don't have direct experience with it, so I'm just sort of talking out my ass. The Flyfish Volador frame has a metal front end. That's going to be fairly durable. Although, again, in this weight class, how much difference is like a plastic front end versus a metal front end really going to be? It looks similar in terms of its arm thickness and its plate thickness. The Grinder Reno, whenever I think durable frame, yeah, if you're talking durable, what about something specifically designed to be a Bando Basher durable? What about the Grinder Reno 3.5? Right? Botgrinder's grinder frame is well known as an ultra durable 5-inch, and the Grinder Reno is designed to be an ultra durable 3.5-inch. If I were really concerned about durability, then like maybe this is a durable frame. Maybe this is a durable frame. But like this is specifically marketed as a durable frame. And then like if somebody markets a durable frame and then it doesn't live up, then you're going to see Facebook and Reddit be filled with people saying it's all a lie. But no one's revolting against Botgrinder and saying this, and his frames have held up to the tests. So I would be tempted to go with something like the Grinder Reno 3.5. And I don't need to ask you to tell me in the chat what you think of that, because I just know that that frame has got a reputation. So that's where I would steer you. Of course, it's heavy, as people are pointing out. Pierre Fortner points out that the Rotorite Tank 3.5 is another good choice. That's true. The Rotorite Tank frame, TANQ, is designed to be extra durable. It is heavy. We got a question here from Mupshot. Blunty, I don't know if you queued that. The Mupshot asked, is there any advantage to a small capacitor on the VTX power directly? And the short answer is no. Essentially no. The problem is that when you put a capacitor on the, the VTX power directly, maybe, but probably not. I thought you were asking about putting a capacitor on the XT60 or XT30, and that there's no reason to do that. There's essentially no effect. You could potentially clean things up by putting a capacitor on the VTX power directly, but the reality is that the ESC and the motors make so much noise when you have big black lines in the video, it usually means that the ESC motor output is in some way getting bridged over to the ground plane or to the video signal. And usually when that's happening, it's so bad that no amount of capacitors will completely fix it. And you need to go back and remove the source of the crossover of the electricity. Like a motor screw is touching a motor wire, and therefore the motor output is getting directly into the ground plane. You have to just fix that problem. Okay. Let's see here. Let's get some more questions here. If my receiver antenna is damaged, will my receiver suffer from long-term damage even when I've replaced the antenna? Tiny Rotor, a receiver will not be damaged by a broken antenna. A transmitter can be damaged by a broken antenna depending on various things, sometimes but not always. What will happen is your receiver is also a transmitter because your receiver transmits telemetry data. If you run a receiver with no antenna for a long time, a lot of times you will burn out the telemetry transmitter. It depends on the output power. If your receiver has like a 10 milliwatt transmitter, telemetry radio, maybe it won't burn out because it's such a small output power. If it has a higher powered telemetry radio, it may burn out eventually. So the receiver will still work. You just will have reduced telemetry range or no telemetry. So that's the effect of that. Let's see here. What functionality would the Radiomaster RP4TD have if it was used with a non-Gemini transmitter like the Boxer? Would it be able to do antenna diversity? Let's take a look at this. Here is the Radiomaster RP4TD. Express LRS 2.4 gig. No, wait. The RP4TD? What's the 4? Hang on. RP4TD. Stop. TDM, is that the one? No?
You're talking about XR4, right?
Oh, I'm thinking about the XR4. Thank you, Blenty. Yeah, the DBR4 is the one I'm thinking of. Okay, but he specifically asked about the RP4TD, right? I just want to make sure I'm looking at the right one.
That's
so
correct.
What would happen if this receiver was used with a non-Gemini transmitter? So just for background information, Gemini is the technology in Express LRS where the transmitter has 2 radios and it can transmit on both of those radios at the same time to improve the odds of your data getting through. It transmits the same data on 2 different frequencies. They hop around, and if one of them gets corrupted and doesn't get through, the other one just has a chance of getting through. That's the gist of it. And when you in order to use Gemini, you need a Gemini transmitter that has 2 antennas, like the Radiomaster Nomad is one of them, and you need a full diversity receiver that can listen on 2 antennas at the same time. And you have 1 transmitter and 1 receiver, and transmitter number 2 and receiver number 2, and they hop around and they do their thing. If you use a receiver like this RP4TD with a non-Gemini transmitter, you still get some advantage. You get full antenna diversity. So these 2 antennas, one may be in the front of the quad, one may be in the back of the quad. One may be on the left arm, one may be on the right arm. And the idea is that one of them may be shadowed at any given time and the other one will get signal, and that's antenna diversity. So you absolutely could have a benefit to using a receiver like this with a non-Gemini transmitter because you still have the benefit of diversity. Yep, that's the takeaway there. And for receivers at least, any Express LRS full diversity receiver can do Gemini. And any Gemini transmitter can do transmit diversity as well, but yeah. Noam Greenberg says, on my first flight, I checked the pitch roll yaw like you say. Okay, good. You did the tilt test is what I call it. And then I went to do a little flight line of sight and crashed it because I never tested in the sim line of sight. So what should I do? Don't try to fly line of sight if you don't know how. Or practice flying line of sight until you learn how. I think what you're thinking about is after I do the tilt test, I say to arm and raise throttle until the quad just lifts into a hover and then immediately disarm. I don't suggest that you actually try to fly it line of sight. You leave the stick centered. The quad lifts into the air. It begins to drift. You just verify that you're able to hover at all, and then you immediately lower throttle, set it down, and disarm. What you tried to do is you lifted off and you started banging the sticks and trying to fly it, and it crashed. Because of course it did. Because you don't know how to fly line of sight. So don't try to do something you don't know how to do. What should I do? Don't do that. Yeah. But you don't need to be able to fly line of sight to do the basic pre-flight test that I show in my tutorial. If you just do the tilt test first, left, right, up, down, yaw, and then you slowly raise throttle until the quad just lifts off the ground, and then you immediately set it down and you disarm because you don't know how to fly line of sight, and you will crash if you try to. Did somebody say analog is not what you want for long range? Blunty, did someone say that? Is there a question going on about long range? Analog absolutely is it's like arguably the king of long range. Why would you say analog is not what you want for long range? Analog is the king for long range. Absolutely. Show me a 10-watt DJI video transmitter, Walksnail video transmitter. All of the long range records are held by analog. Analog is the king for long range. Absolutely. Doesn't look good. That's not what you care about when you're doing long range. You're doing long range because you want to go far. Okay. I think you must be trolling. Exiled says, apparently my super chat was unworthy. Did we miss a super chat from Exiled, Blunty?
If you can click in the YouTube part and look at the super chat list, it'll show it to you. Like if you click the money button at the
Fan
bottom.
funding. Yeah, why did you get Exiled FPV? It must have come in before the queue began, perhaps. Exiled FPV asks, thank you for $5, Exiled FPV. Sorry we missed you. With the whoop craze, is crash recovery still relevant in 2025? Yes, absolutely. I still think crash recovery is 100% relevant. If you're flying a tiny whoop in acro mode, you should consider using crash recovery. I made a video about that. Never miss an opportunity for self-promotion. Winning whoop racers use Betaflight crash recovery, should you? And what crash recovery does is, when you're starting to crash, Betaflight goes, look at that guy. Oh, he's talking to himself. I did a little sketch on this one, I forgot about that. When the Betaflight detects that the quad seems like it's crashing, it makes it level out and recover itself. The problem with crash recovery is that if you trigger it, if it triggers itself when you weren't crashing, then it can be super annoying. So not everybody uses it, but it's worth looking into, and you should check out this video. Winning whoop racers use Betaflight crash recovery, should you? And see if you think that you want to be using it. Okay. Let's see here. Let's get another question. How can I get a high quality stick overlay on my OSD? Is there a specific setting of firmware I need to enable? No, there's no good way for you to do that. Betaflight's stick overlay is really low resolution and janky because Betaflight uses a character-based OSD. The character-based OSD means you can't just draw graphics like lines and stuff. You have to have little characters, sprites, if you will, if you're familiar with that phrase, and Betaflight puts the sprites on screen to move the sticks around, but it has extremely low resolution. Brain FPV Radix. The Brain FPV Radix flight controller, RADIX, has a proprietary graphical OSD, has for years. And if you buy a Brain FPV Radix flight controller, you will get an actual really good graphical OSD and stick overlay. Most of it will look just like Betaflight, but the stick overlay specifically will be nice and high resolution. So, I mean, that could be an answer for you. But beware, because Brain FPV Radix also has custom firmware that you can only get from Brain FPV. It doesn't run the standard build of Betaflight, and that means that you may have some delay in getting, like people right now are using Betaflight 4.6, because Betaflight 4.6, even though it is not released yet, it is not ready for prime time. But some people are using it because it has position hold, and they want to test it out. Well, I don't know whether Brain FPV has put out a build of Betaflight 4.6 for their flight controllers, but they might not have, and then you would just kind of be out of luck until they did. Okay? In the past, it has happened that they've been a little bit behind the times in terms of releasing new versions, and so people using their boards have had a delay. So it's up to you. But that would be a thing you could do. Any Betaflight flight controller is probably going to be using a standard character-based OSD and have a really bad stick overlay. Here's a question from Tomek Zdeb, who says, do you think Flywoo Explorer with the 04 Pro Radiomaster Pocket and Goggles N3 is a good beginner combo for FPV learning and some cinematic cruising, or maybe something like the FlyLens 85. I think the Flywoo Explorer, I would hesitate to recommend it as your first drone. It's a good drone, but the Explorer is designed for very lightweight and long flight times, and as a result, it is less durable than I would prefer for a beginner drone. I'm not saying it's going to break on your very first crash, but the way that beginners fly and the way that beginners crash, I would hesitate to like suggest it as your very first drone. I do think the Radiomaster Pocket and the Goggles N3 is a fine choice, and well, your alternative that you suggest is the Flywoo FlyLens 85. The problem with the FlyLens 85, and again, I like it very much, but the FlyLens 85 comes with the 04 Lite, and the 04 Lite is also not very durable. Actually, that's a lie. You can order the FlyLens 85 with the 04 Pro. If you did that, I might consider that to be an okay beginner choice because the 04 Pro is a little more durable than the 04 Lite, and the FlyLens 85 is reasonably durable. So I'm not sure any of those are perfect setups for a beginner, and as as Joseph Tahari points out, I don't know if you're referring to this or not, Joseph, but it's apropos. That's an expensive setup for a beginner, but presumably if you're thinking that direction, you have the budget for it. Stefan asks, I bought some old drones as bangers, old SpeedyBee F4 and an Omnibus F4, but they have PPM S-Bus. Does this support Express LRS? The SpeedyBee F4 absolutely should support Express LRS. It doesn't require S-Bus input. It just has UARTs. Use the UART. And I would think the same for the Omnibus F4. I don't know why you couldn't just use normal Express LRS. But both of those flight controllers also have S-Bus input, and Express LRS has the ability to output S-Bus from its receiver. So if you wanted to use S-Bus, you could. PPM is right on out. Betaflight doesn't support PPM anymore. I mean, like, I think it's still there in the interface, but flight controllers are not made with a PPM input. So even if you can, in Betaflight, set the receiver type to PPM, I don't think there's anywhere to put the wire. I think you're just out of luck there. But just use the standard Express LRS Crossfire protocol. Here's a question from Confuse You. Confuse You also in the Discord. Thank you for being a patron, Confuse You. What do you think about using M3 dual lock tape to secure the top plate, small electronics such as a buzzer or receiver instead of zip ties? I mean, I don't know why you wouldn't just use double-sided tape like alien tape at that point. You're going to have, I think, better adhesion, and if you need to move it or remove it, you just get another piece of tape and you stick it on. I'm not sure I see the benefit of using dual lock over just double-sided tape. That is going to stick better, I think. As far as sticking things to the top plate, I don't like to do it. The top plate is constantly being removed for maintenance. If there's stuff stuck to the top plate, you got to pull it off. And I know what you're thinking right now. That's why I want to use dual lock fastener, so I can pull it off and put it back on again. Okay, if that's how you feel, I guess. But the thing is, I don't think that the adhesive on the dual lock fastener is going to do a very good job sticking to uneven surfaces like a receiver. Maybe I'm wrong about that. Whereas like alien tape or a big, thick, fat, double-sided tape really gets on there and holds things. Is there a way to automate swapping batteries while charging? Like the DJI charger will charge one at a time with them all connected. Is there anything like that for LiPo batteries bigger than 1S? Yeah, what you do is you buy a 4-channel charger and you charge 4 batteries at a time. And then if you want to charge 8 batteries at a time, you buy 2 4-channel chargers, etc. You just buy more chargers. If you really want to, you can go with parallel charging to charge many batteries at a time, but that has certain safety risks that you really need to educate yourself on before you go that direction. Yaros says, I think he means continuous mode. Yeah, no, I think he means he wants to charge the batteries one at a time, one after the other. That's just not something that the LiPo chargers we have for hobby batteries will do. Is anybody using Radiomaster Gemini receivers? I am trying to come up with a good way to mount the two dual band antennas. Any ideas, guys? I mean, especially if you've got 900 megahertz antennas, mounting two of them can be a real hassle. The way that it has been done in the past is to do one horizontal and one vertical off the back of the drone. The problem with that is that when you land, the vertical one gets sort of bent, snagged up. Another thing you can do is you mount one in the front and one in the rear, and that way you get diversity, but depending on which direction the drone is facing. I think that's a good approach, although you do potentially need a longer antenna cable to get to the front of the drone, especially if it's a big drone. Another thing I've seen is they'll do one under the left arm, one under the right arm to get some diversity that way. There's various ways to approach it. As far as how to physically mount them, obviously you could come up with some kind of a 3D print for mounting them, or you could, well, there's various ways to go about that, but it's going to require some creativity. I don't think there's just like a standard answer. Why would you want to charge them one after the other? It will take forever. Well, presumably what they're thinking is that the charger doesn't have enough output to charge them 10 at a time, right? So you charge one after the other. Like if I had 10 batteries that I wanted to charge all at once, I would do parallel charging. And I would understand the safety risks and procedures and protocols for doing that without, number one, destroying the batteries, and number two, lighting my house on fire. These are real risks that you need to be aware of. Don't just buy a parallel charge board and start plugging batteries in and then complaining to me when you light your house on fire. Okay? Let's not underestimate the risks of parallel charging. At the same time, now I feel bad because people are like, oh no, parallel charging, you will die. And it's like, guys, come on. You can parallel charge safely. The fact that people often don't doesn't mean that parallel charging is inherently unsafe. It just means that a lot of people are boneheads who don't really educate themselves the way they should. So maybe you shouldn't parallel charge. Ask yourself, am I a bonehead who will not educate myself? In which case, do not do it. It's not inherently unsafe, but yeah. But I got to tell you, and I say this as someone who has a parallel board on the market with my initials on it, a licensed product, because I used to love parallel charging. I just have 4 chargers now, and I can charge 8 batteries at a time, and that's good enough for me. The only time I would parallel charge is, let's say I'm in a situation like, let's say I'm running a drone race, okay? Imagine a scenario where I was running a drone race and the racers didn't have their own batteries. This is a hypothetical. Imagine a scenario where you've got a teacher and the teacher is running a class and there's 12 students. And the students are not managing their own batteries because they're students. They're not cleared to do that yet. They're not safe to do that or trained. At that point, you may need to just constantly be charging 5 or 6 batteries at a time. And you may need to be charging 20 batteries at a time. You reach a point where just buy more chargers is not really effective. And at that point, parallel charging starts to make a lot of sense. But for an individual hobbyist, I mean, like, if I have even a 2-channel charger, but definitely a 4-channel charger, I can crank through the batteries pretty quick. And then I don't have the additional safety risks of parallel charging. And for me, a lot of times these days, like, that's good enough. Just because you can mitigate the safety risk doesn't mean you have to take the safety risk. I have a quad where 2 motors spin very weakly. The other 2 are fine, so it's not an ESC setting issue. Any ideas? I mean, I would question that assumption, although I do agree with you, it's probably not an ESC setting issue, but motors have some variance, right? So you could be in a situation where some of the motors are a little bit more draggy than the others. So 2 of the motors can get spinning freely, and 2 of the motors won't quite spin, just because the ESC startup power is not quite strong enough. That's probably not it, but it might be it. Especially if you are running, no, it's not startup power. If they begin spinning but spin weakly, it's probably not startup power. The other thing is that if in your ESC you enabled temperature protection, a lot of the time ESCs don't have a temperature sensor. So when you enable temperature protection, the ESC simply refuses to spin very strongly. Even when you throttle up, the motor doesn't speed up. It's the motor stays slow. Anytime I see a situation where the ESC, you throttle up the ESC and the ESC just kind of goes, it doesn't get any faster, I wonder if you've turned temperature protection on. And you could have turned temperature protection on for 2 of the ESCs and not the other 2. What makes you think the settings are identical on all 4 of the ESCs, sir? Okay, so it absolutely could be an ESC setting issue. I would check that. I would not assume that wasn't true. But it probably isn't true. So what else could it be? Damaged motors, damaged ESC. How do you figure that out? Take one of the motors that's spinning strongly, move it over to the ESC that is spinning weakly. If that motor begins spinning weakly, you know the ESC is the problem. If that motor still spins strongly, you know the motor is the problem. And then you swap out the part that's damaged.
Yeah, I would also just mention, like, you say I have a quad where 2 motors spin but spin very weakly. Is that when you're arming? Is it possible you're in angle mode and it's tilted, right? Like, you need to test, like, you need to like test, because 2 motors to me seems like leaning quad, right? I instantly think leaning quad. So I would just make sure you're testing with the props off, looking at RPMs in the motors
and
tab.
use the motors tab, 100%.
Yeah, make sure you're like, physically moving the slider up, not arming in the motors tab, not arming on the ground, to make sure there's an issue with the motors and this isn't like PID loop or control or something.
Yeah, good, very good. I hadn't thought that direction. Well done. I really appreciate you, Blunty. We're a good team, and by that I mean you cover my ass sometimes. That's what the essence of being a good team is, right? You cover each other's ass every now and then. Oh man. Hang on. I really wanna. I'm so. Wait 1 second. Okay, here we go. Okay. Let me upload this photo. Wait 1 second. Okay, photo is uploaded. Hold on. Hold on. I want to show you guys because I'm so just, I don't know what the word is. Enchanted. I'm so enchanted with oh, hang on. I have to go to here. There we go. Look what I'm looking at in front of me right now. Is this not, I mean, welcome to the future, kids. Does this not just tickle the shit out of you? Oh my gosh. What a thing. What a thing. Oh my gosh. To do such a thing in a hotel, just randomly set up studio. We got a couple more super chats coming in. Let's take a look at those. Here is Forever a Beginner, who asks, thank you for €5. I need analog and walk snail goggle. Would HD0 Box Pro plus walk snail VRX be a good choice? I could see that as a good choice. The Box Pro is a solid analog goggle for a good price. It also has HD0 support if you ever want it. It is a box goggle, so you have to make sure you're going to be okay with a box goggle. You want to, you can't really try on the fit and finish to see if it's going to fit your face, so it's a bit of a crapshoot there. Would HD0 Box Pro plus, it's got a low latency HDMI input for the Walksnail VRX, so you're not really losing anything there. Yeah, it could be a good choice. You could also just consider getting a separate Walksnail goggle and HD0 goggle. I don't know if that would be better though. I'm not sure that's better. Yeah, I think that's a solid contender without any major downsides except for the fact that it is a box goggle and you have to make sure the ergonomics of a box goggle are going to work for you. Mark Zidkov, thank you for 100 Hong Kong dollars. Please help me if you can. My quad hovers just fine. When I give throttle, it just flips or tilts. I sent you an email with videos, specs, and settings. Okay, let's look at this email. One second. Let's see if we can find this email. Quad flip issue.
If you want to email JB, you can email him at jb@joshuabardwell.com.
That is true. You can send me your questions. Okay. We don't have any audio. It stops playing back. I can't really... Oh, okay. Yeah. So presumably you just throttled up there and it did that big dip. Oh, beautiful. I don't know why my playback is freezing. Yeah. I am very curious what ESC you have. Come on, buddy. Yeah. Back and left both times. Like the Zapruder film. I always think of the Zapruder. Mamba Stack. BL Heli S. Damn. I was wondering if it was AM32. But it was not. So that is just not in play. Motors. 2650 kV. Are you on a 4S or a 6S battery? That's relevant. If you've got a 2650 kV, can I see the battery voltage, perhaps, in your video? Does it have battery voltage? I'm looking. 24.3 volts. Okay, so your 6S, here's the first thing I notice. Your 6S battery at 2650 kV, that's excessive. A lot of motors will desync. A lot of ESCs will desync. They just can't handle such a high RPM. It is possible to do it. I personally have run a 2650 kV or roundabouts a 2600-ish kV motor on a 5-inch quad. This is a 5-inch quad. Hang on. I have to just double check the props. I'm assuming it's a 5-inch quad. 2203.5 motors. I assume that's a 5-inch quad. Yeah, so 5-inch props, 2650 kV, 6S. That's too high in RPM. A lot of ESCs won't like that and won't be able to handle it. They'll just have problems with desyncs. So, like, I can't promise you that's the issue, but it's such an outlier. You're so far outside the normal RPM range of a motor. Oh, he says 3.5. He's writing in the doc now. 3.5 inch? Maybe. On 3.5 inch props, you might get away with it. Although, there is a part of me that's saying, what does the ESC care what prop is on there? If the ESC can do 2650 kV without desyncing on a 3.5 inch prop, what does it care if it's a 5-inch prop? It's going to draw more current and be more likely to overheat. But as far as maintaining sync, it's going to be the same. So it should be okay. If you're on 3.5 inch props, you're well within the normal sort of RPM range. Although, again, I am not a big fan of 6S on a 3.5 inch. I don't think there's much benefit. And I think it's more likely to run into issues like this. Yeah. So all I can tell you is that in 2 of the videos you uploaded, it tipped back and left both times. It makes me think that you have a problem with your back left motor, your back left ESC, and I would start thinking about whether I should change the motor and see if that fixes it. It's a bind and fly, so presumably it was built from the factory, and it's not just like got some bad solder joint. But then anything can happen. All the motors spin in Betaflight with the same RPM and sound normal. Yeah, it feels to me like you're having what I would call a desync. You could try increasing the timing. Does BlueJay let you change the timing in software? I think it does. You're running at 48K frequency. You could try changing the frequency, although usually if you're having this problem, higher frequency will be better and lower will be worse. You could try increasing the timing. Maybe that'll make a difference. It's not related to PIDs and it's not related to rates. It's 100% an issue between the ESC and the motor. Well, 99% an issue between the ESC and the motor. is what I would say. They do make me wonder, like when I built a 5-inch 6S quad with 2650 kV and it was my 160 mile an hour quad, I went to a lot of effort to mitigate the issue of desyncs, right? Because the motors would be spinning at such a high RPM that the ESC might need to do something different to deal with it. Why is it fine to run a 3-inch prop at 2650 kV on 6S? The RPM of the motor is the same, therefore the timing is the same. The ESC is working harder to spin the bigger prop, so there's more current. Maybe it's that the motor is less responsive. Since the motor is less responsive, you have more, I don't know. That's an interesting question. I got to think about it. Maybe some of my assumptions are wrong there. Always good to be shown some of your assumptions might be wrong as an opportunity to educate yourself. Okay. Bats Benzer FPV, thank you for 10 Swiss francs. Are there any special Betaflight filter settings I should consider when tuning a 10-inch quad on 4.5? Yeah, 100%. You will 100% bring your master slider down. So, here's what I mean by that. Again, we'll just go to virtual mode. I might need to plug in a quad, I'm not sure. PID tuning, filter settings. Okay, now I got to plug a quad in. Hold on. Let me find a quadcopter I can plug in. Sit tight. Do-do-do. Oh, hey. That reminds me. Wait 1 second. I'm going to answer this question first. Connect. PID tuning. Filter settings. So, let me make this window a little smaller. Oh, that'll do. Then we'll do this. Oh, that's fine. And then we'll do this. Oh, yeah. Oh, come on, come on, come on. There we go. Oh, that's kind of cool. Ah, that's actually pretty good. Okay, so on a 10-inch quad, one of the first things you're always going to do is you're going to bring this filter multiplier down. And that is going to lower the cutoff frequency of the filter. 10-inch props spin slower. Therefore, the RPM of the motors is lower. The primary goal of the filters is to filter out the motor noise. The 5-inch props, they spin, maybe above 250 hertz is where, I don't know the exact number, but in my head it's right around 200, 250 hertz for a 5-inch. That's the default. A 10-inch prop is going to spin slower, therefore it's going to come down below that cutoff and make noise that's going to get through the filters. So we would want to lower that. If we know the RPM of the motors, we actually could come up with an actual value here. One of the things I like about iNav, and again, I don't have an iNav bird to plug in, but in the iNav filter tuning, they actually have recommended settings based on your prop size. It just says, for a 10-inch prop, set it to 70 hertz or whatever. So I would definitely want to lower this multiplier. The real way to do this would be to use black box logging. Pull up the black box and see where the motor frequencies were and where the filters are. So that's going to come down. How low it needs to come down, I don't really know. But I think it could potentially come down as low as like 0.5, because 10 inches is fairly low. Likewise, we might also bring the D-term filter multiplier down. And then in the PID profile, usually the bigger the props, the less responsive the motors, the higher the master multiplier needs to be. Okay? Now those are general directions, and the actual PID tuning is outside the scope of, I'm just going to like wing it on a live stream comment. But that's a general direction for where you might want to go. Hey, I thought of that because this is my bird that has the RunCam Wi-Fi Link V2 in it. And you may have noticed you haven't seen any content about the RunCam Wi-Fi Link V2 on my channel. And that's because mine isn't working. So one of the first things I tried to do was flash Ruby onto my receiver. And every time I flash Ruby onto my receiver, it boots up normally, as far as I can tell, and then it just stops working. The flash is successful. When I power it up, I see on my display, I see all the little things loading and unpacking and drivers and the little character base. And then at the part where you should then see the Ruby interface in your goggles, I get nothing, no matter what I do. And RunCam thinks maybe I have bad hardware and is offering to send me another one, and that's going to take weeks. If anybody out there has a Wi-Fi Link V2 from RunCam, a VRX, that you would like to lend me, I will send it back to you. I will find some way to, thank you. Well, I'm not talking about cash here. Come on. I don't know. If you want cash, maybe I'll buy. If you want to sell it to me, I'll buy it off you. That's fair. But I don't, especially because these are hard to get now. I don't expect you to give it up to me. But if you have one and you want to lend it to me or sell it to me or make a deal with me to make it worth your while, I would love to get one because I would love to put this gosh dang video out. But I can't push the gosh dang video out if my gosh dang hardware doesn't work. So, just want to put it out there. Blunty, if you will prioritize this live stream clip, this is how I abuse my position as a YouTuber to try to get content made. If you would prioritize getting this live stream clip out, I sure would appreciate it. I asked on the Discord server, didn't get any replies. I assume that means nobody has one, but maybe somebody out there has one. And I do want to be really clear. I'm not in any way criticizing RunCam. RunCam has been extremely communicative and extremely responsive. They tried to talk me through the flashing process, and then when when it didn't work, they were like, well, maybe you have bad hardware, we'll send you another one. They immediately offered to send me another one. I just know that's going to take time, and I would just like to get this taken care of. And then the other thing is that, did I get bad hardware? Well, I mean, I was sent pre-release hardware so that I could make content about it, and so potentially, but shit happens. I'm not mad at RunCam. RunCam has been, but I would rather have someone in the USA just send me one and I have it in 3 days than have to go back and forth with RunCam and then import it and international shipping, yada, yada, yada. Alrighty. Okay. Super chats caught up. Oh, why isn't 4 inches more popular? Good question. Good question. I've had a lot of fun with a 4-inch drone. And there was a time when a little 4-inch drone was like one of my favorites to fly. And yet, we still end up gravitating either to 3 or 3.5 inch or to 5 inch. And the answer is that 4 inch is in this weird middle ground where it's not quite as powerful and responsive as a 5 inch. But it's still like a 3-inch drone is in this size where it just magically becomes more durable because it's so small. Like, are you familiar with the concept that the bigger a body is, the harder it is to make it durable, right? You drop an ant off the Empire State Building and it just lands and walks away. You drop an elephant off the Empire State Building, it's gone for. By the way, don't drop elephants off there's a lot of reasons not to do that. If you were thinking, oh, it's a good idea for a YouTube video, don't do that. It's the same true with quadcopters. You crash a 7-inch, you're going to break something every time. You crash a tiny whoop, most of the time it just bounces back up and nothing happens. And 3 inches and 3.5 inches are still in that size where they're small enough, compact enough, and light enough that they generally tend to get a boost to their durability. The trade-off is the motors, though. 3-inch motors have little 2mm shafts usually, and the motors are the weak spot on a 3-inch build. But the frame is generally not the weak spot. On a 5-inch drone, it's still pretty durable, but it's not quite as bulletproof as a 3-inch, especially because it gets going faster a lot of the time, although not always. And 5-inch motors actually are more durable, I think, than 3-inch motors because they have a little bit more mass and are able to be just beefed up a little bit more. 4-inch is in this weird spot where you still have motors with 2mm shafts. Typically, you'll be using like a 2004 motor or something like that. So the motors are super fragile because you've got a bigger prop with more leverage. You've got more mass in the quadcopter, and it's potentially moving at a higher speed. The motors are super fragile. The frame is just starting to get big enough that it's not as durable, but it's not quite, it's just in this weird middle ground where it's like a 5-inch is better and a 3-inch is better depending on which direction you go. And I don't know if that's like a physics thing or if that's just like no one's made the perfect 4-inch quad yet, but that's my take on it. The other thing is, back when carrying GoPros was the norm, and today with high definition digital video transmitters, a lot of people just skip the GoPro and don't even care. But back when carrying GoPros was like a thing that a lot of people were concerned with doing, a 4-inch is not quite powerful enough to comfortably carry a GoPro, and a 5-inch was like the minimum size where you could easily carry a GoPro and still get great performance. So if you didn't want to carry a GoPro, you'd just go down to a 3-inch, right? And that's another reason why there's this stratification. That's my take.
Yeah, I was going to say as well, we've had another thing come up in the recent few years, which is sub 250, people aiming for sub 250. So you're seeing a very large increase in that market, the 3 to 3.5 inch light sub 250 drones, because that's that's like sort of the biggest size that makes sense to fit sub 250 on. And so like, I don't think historically, I don't think, Ciadians was flying 3 inches, but I don't think like everybody was flying 3 inches. Like there was nowhere near, to me, the amount of people on that hardware until we started to get these rules in different countries in the US and other places that said you need to be under this weight.
Yeah, and I think that 3 to 3.5 inches is the biggest drone that gets under 250 grams without a lot of compromises. Like I think the best flying 3.5 inch you could build is over 250 grams. It's closer to 300, 325 grams. It's got a little bit bigger motors, a little bit bigger battery, etc., etc., etc. But a 3.5 inch under 250 grams, it doesn't give up much. And a 3-inch under 250 grams gives up almost nothing in terms of its flight performance and so forth. But a 5-inch to get under 250 grams, like the Umagod 250 is the only 5-inch under 250 grams that's mass produced. And it's great. It flies great. Umagod flies it just like if you just meet Umagod someday and you say you want to go fly, he'll pull out a 250 and that's just what he flies, right? Maybe that relates to his commercial work. I don't know. But the thing is, 4-inch to try to get under 250 grams, well, it's easier than 5-inch, but you kind of may as well just go down to 3-inch and get a pretty good flying quad with fewer compromises. So, if you build a 4-inch with 5-inch motors and 6S, how does it not have the power of a 5-inch? Is the prop difference that big of a deal? Yeah, absolutely. Your props are 20% smaller. You make significantly less thrust on a 4-inch than a 5-inch because the thrust rises non-linearly with the area of the prop. Now, I don't know the exact math, but 20% more prop area gives you more than 20% more thrust. And you wouldn't build a 4-inch with 5-inch motors because those 5-inch motors are going to be too big, they're going to be excessive torque, excessive current draw, the wrong KV for a 4-inch prop. So, but even if you did that, if you just built a 4-inch with 5-inch hardware, you still won't get the same thrust because you're using 4-inch props. Anyway, let's see here. Here's a question from Fern, who I noticed because Fern is also a patron. This question comes from the Discord server. Thank you, Fern, for being a patron. If you guys want to join my Patreon, you can do it at the link in the video description below. Yeah, Blunty, go ahead.
Okay, before we get to that, can I, so it's 20% bigger, but isn't the area more like 50% bigger or 60% or 70% or something? Yeah,
that's the issue. We have a 20% increase in diameter, but what matters is the increase in area. And I'm not even sure that whether the thrust is linear with respect to the area. It may be nonlinear with respect to the area. I don't know.
I just think it's unintuitive until you like figure it out one day when you try to order pizzas. You know what I mean? Like,
right.
You don't really think about the fact that like, oh, there's like a lot more pizza here in a large than a medium. You don't realize how much you increase because you think you're only going up by the percentage of difference in inches, but you're actually, the area is increasing higher than that.
Yeah, except, I mean, if I was going to argue with you about that, it's that the prop is not a circle. So if your prop is yay wide and you add more length, you've added a linear amount of area. Although a 5-inch prop is going to be wider than a 4-inch prop as well.
Oh, you really think it's only the contact that matters? Versus the...
I think it's the prop area, literally the area of the... You think it's the prop? You think it's the disc area?
I think it's the disc. Correct. I was thinking it was the disc.
That's
I would not have thought it's the cord. You're talking about like the cord length or whatever the term is.
I think it is the surface area of the prop, because the surface area, and it's stupid that I'm still gonna debate this with you because what the hell, but I just want to acknowledge that somewhere out there is a person who is trained in this field who just knows the answer. This is not a mystery, and we sound like idiots debating it, and I just want to acknowledge that. I think it's the surface area of the prop, because that is what engages with the air molecules. The more surface area your prop is, the more air molecules will be propelled downward as the prop rotates, assuming a constant RPM. And so I think it is proportional to the area.
Doesn't it hit? Yeah, I would think it's like there's more air molecules in the area, so you're going to hit more of them with the circle that you're making. So essentially you're disrupting the air in the disc, right?
But the calculation would be, if we think about conservation of momentum, the calculation would be how much air is propelled downward per unit time. And that will be proportional to thrust. If you assume a constant RPM, then as the prop gets longer, the outer tip of the prop is moving faster. Oh, think about that. The longer the prop, the faster the tip is moving, and therefore the more air molecules it is engaging with per unit time. And that is independent, Blunty. I'm going to talk myself back into agreeing with you. That's independent of the surface area of the prop itself, right?
Yes.
The prop has moved through more space, and therefore, and that's potentially why the bigger the diameter prop has a nonlinear increase in thrust. Very interesting.
Yeah. I'm going to say, though, that there's also something to do with prop area, because you have to, like, if you imagine some kind of ideal prop where it's very thin versus a thick prop, right? It's going to push a different amount. So you can't just it can't just be the disc. So I imagine both are involved. But
interesting.
But it does seem, I would guess it's the disc mainly that matters.
Yeah, interesting.
That was fun.
Interesting. That's fun. It's fun to kind of break a problem down into the physics and think about the fundamentals. And having watched a lot of Veritasium videos lately, I know that if I was better at physics and math, like if I could do calculus and really, it's fun to watch those Veritasium videos where they break a physical phenomena down to the formulas, and then they rearrange the formulas and they draw some truth from it. I feel like we're kind of like dipping our toe in that water very, very ineffectively, but still fun.
I'll say on a tiny channel where relative to Veritasium, where nobody will actually care. I think that I'm a little concerned with the direction that channel has gone.
Oh yeah? Tell me.
Yeah, like there's that laser video where he talks about light takes all paths. Mm-hmm. That's not real. That's not real.
Uh-huh. They were just picking up a reflection.
It was only because the laser is thicker. If you use a photon, it doesn't take all paths. It's a misunderstanding of how it works. So stuff like that is like, he's using a team and they're writing a video for people, and like you're losing something in it, and sometimes it bugs me a little bit. But the other thing
Yeah, go ahead.
The other thing I was just going to say is I watch a lot of Hank Green, and Hank does this thing a lot of times where on video, he will just record himself learning something.
Yeah,
and I think
I've seen those.
Part of our conversation, I think, like the reason I like talking about what we do instead of just stopping and Googling it and trying to figure it out is like, it's just nice to discuss those things back and forth and try to come to the understanding. Like you said, think about the physics and use your brain to kind of work out what's happening on a logical level before you verify. I think it's important.
The most important thing, I think, because you and I have sat down, we have a little bit of training in terms of like, we understand, like I took geometry in high school, so I understand the relationship between the diameter of a circle and its area and its circumference, right? And then I can think about how that affects the physics. I understand in a very general way the concept of conservation of momentum and how that results in a prop making thrust, right? We can talk about those things, but the most important thing is that you understand at a core level when you are talking out your own ass. And like, I'm going to walk away from this conversation thinking about maybe we have some explanation for how a prop works, but I'm not going to hold myself out as an expert, and in my own head, I'm not going to come to a conclusion that I understand this phenomena. And I think a thing that happens a lot in the world today, and I'm seeing it happen, we've got all these, and we're not going to like let the chat devolve into conversations about politics and so forth and economics. We've got some global economic things going on in the world today, and a lot of people think they have an understanding of how it works because they have talked themselves around to you create an explanation in your own head of how things work that makes sense to you, and then you make the mistake of concluding that that must be how it works. And that is a huge mistake that leads people to arrogant ignorance. And you can commit yourself to the exercise of trying to understand the phenomena and trying to make sense of it, but you're not an expert. You're just an idiot, and so am I. I'm just an idiot. So I think about how a propeller works, and I go, well, it kind of makes sense. Maybe we've understood it. But I know I'm an idiot, and I'm going to walk out of here remembering that I'm an idiot. And then when an expert who knows about how props work tells me the truth, I'm going to commit that to memory and trust the expert. And I think we have, in our world today, we have made a big mistake of the average person assuming that if they come up with an explanation that makes sense to them, or if somebody presents them with an explanation that fits with their preconceived notions, that clicks with them, that must be right. Instead of saying, an expert who actually understands the solution, the problem, and can get results is telling me how it works, I should just trust them. It doesn't mean trust blindly, but it does mean that we value people who understand things instead of people who give us explanations that sound and feel right, but have no basis in reality.
Yeah, I think the issue, and what Skydozer says, do not blindly trust experts, vet experts before trusting experts. One of the hardest parts about this whole thing is the more you learn in the world, the more you realize that it's difficult to vet somebody who's a true expert. Like, you have to rely on other experts to do upwards vetting, right? Who like partially understand things. Like let's say I want to go vet a quantum theory right now. I can't do that.
No.
Like, I can't even, like, I don't have any way to vet his papers that he's written for the 40 years, right? It's impossible.
He'll be like, here, and it's just a bunch of calculus. And you'll be like, what does this mean? And he's like, well, I can't explain it. There you go. I explained it to you. Don't you see all the math?
Correct. So then it's a question of, okay, so I can go to his colleagues and ask them, or maybe they don't understand his problem or haven't worked it out. So then I have to go to some mathematician who like can understand how to conceive of it. And if they have the ability, then they could try to confirm to me, right? And it's like, at what level do I believe that person? And I think personally, that kind of stuff just comes from years and years of living and critically thinking and understanding how functions act, and never blindly trusting somebody 100%, but using assumptions based on systems to say it's likely that this is a thing, right? Like, that's what, neither of us are never really saying we're sure of most things that we haven't verified personally, but we're saying we trust in the systems built and can critically analyze enough personally to understand that. That's,
this comment, I feel like this is a topic worth, and thank you, chat, for not letting this descend into political rabble and making me time out a bunch of people. Good job, chat. Top Duke says, if the experts were legit and weren't lying all the time, people would value it more. To which, this touches on what Blunty is talking about, which is when an expert tells you something, how do you vet the expert? How do you know that this is an expert who is telling you the truth as is best understood versus a grifter who is just trying to mislead you? How can you tell the difference between those things? And that's a very deep question, especially if you have certain beliefs that lead you to be mistrustful of certain types of experts. Maybe you don't believe that you share the same motivations as the person. Maybe there are value judgments involved. And so there are a lot of things that we use to vet experts and decide if we want to follow their advice. But here's the thing I will say about this. Here's what I would recommend, what I do, what I hope that I do. Start with the belief that the truth exists and is accessible to us. The minute you start behaving as if the truth doesn't matter, you've lost. The HBO series Chernobyl ends with a quote that when we tell lies, we incur a debt to the truth, and the debt must always be paid. And it's just a question of how big of a debt we incur before we get bit in the ass and a nuclear reactor explodes because we've been lying for years and years and years, and we have a bunch of dead people and damage, environmental damage, etc. So you start with the premise that the truth exists and can be known, okay? And then you, as Blunty said, you have systems. When it's working at its best, the scientific method, peer-reviewed papers, scientific research, etc. This is almost like a priesthood that is designed to try to find the truth despite the worst instincts of human bias, despite the fact that humans will, money will get involved and corporate interests will get involved. And despite all of the ways in which the scientific method is corrupted in the real world, it is still the best method that has been invented in all of history for finding the truth. Every other method of assessing the truth is inferior, despite all the problems with the scientific method as implemented in the world today. So,
I do.
You go ahead.
I don't want to stop you. But basically, the other thing is I just want to reiterate. You don't. Truth here does not mean I know 100%. Truth means based inside of this system, I understand this to be true through all my critical thinking and logic and understanding of scientific process and method and published information.
Truth means that this is the best understanding of the way things are that we have available to us at this moment. It doesn't mean we know everything. It doesn't mean we're never wrong. Sometimes people look at science cases where science said one thing and it was wrong, and then science changed its mind, and they say, aha, science has failed. And it's like, well, just making shit up off the top of your head isn't going to do any better.
Science has succeeded when it changes based on data. That's the point of science, right? Like, yeah. If you were holding a belief based on data that then was updated or changed or new information was given, holding the old belief is faith, not science. That's the whole point of this, right? We're using the best information we have based on scientific method and based on published data and all this information to get what we can get. And you believe those things because of A, B, C, D, not because A jumps to D, and you're just going to believe that forever. Right. I just think that's such an important key point, because like you said, people really think they're like, how can you know that? And it's like, I don't know that for sure. I just know that as best I can know that as a logical, understanding person working in the systems with which we work in.
Well, and I look at results, the famous quote, the tree by its fruit, right? If scientists make medicines that cure disease, so to speak, then I think that when they tell me, here's how I did that, I should believe them. But here's where we'll close on this topic, because I'm sure you and I could go on for a long time, but I kind of think we should wrap it up. If experts were legit and weren't lying all the time, people would value it more. If you don't find experts credible, that's absolutely your prerogative. You have to be able to try to develop the skills for vetting experts and deciding if you believe them. But here's the thing that you got to be careful about. You go, oh, no, these experts are full of shit. And then you say, I'm going to believe this. I don't believe the experts. What I believe is X. It's fine if you say, I don't believe the experts, but then you have to just live in a state of agnostic ignorance, which is okay. There are things in the world that are not known and are not knowable. It's okay to say, I don't know. I don't understand. The experts say X, I kind of don't believe them. And then you have to stop there. And I think a lot of times what we do is we say the experts say X, I don't like them, they're full of shit, I don't believe them. I believe this guy. He's not an expert, he's just some dude. Sorry, I bumped the table, right? Or I believe this blog post that I read, or I believe what my grandmother told me, right? You have to stop at the no information and not let the wrong information in. And I think a lot of times we fail at that, myself included. You got to fight that. Okay, let's get some more super chats. We've had some super chats come in. Let's get the super chats. Michael Jones, thank you for $5. I have an 04 light on my 5-inch racing drone connected to the Hobbywing X-Rotor F7. DJI plug, I have image and OSD. When disarmed, arm equals no video. Does the, sorry about that. That was, should have muted my mic there. That's not true. Oh my gosh, Krista Lorian, that's not true. That's not true. They don't teach that in medical school. I've never been in medical school, and yet I am sure that they do not teach that in medical school. It doesn't pass the smell test. Use your critical thinking. Okay, back to this question. Oh my gosh. I'm going to start timing out the chat. It's coming. Does the Hobbywing X-Rotor have a pit switch function where it can switch the VTX on and off remotely? Does the LED on the 04 turn off when you arm? That's the first thing I would check. Is it powering off? Many flight controllers have the ability to switch the video transmitter on and off, and my guess is that your flight controller has that and you haven't configured it right and you're accidentally switching it off when you arm. Okay. So check if it flashes red. That's not a thing. The 04 light, what does flashing red mean? That's weird. I don't think the 5-volt regulator is the issue, Scott Milano, because the 5-volt regulator wouldn't care if you were armed or not.
If you had low power mode on, it might, right?
Oh, you think when you arm it goes to full power and then it hits the 5-volt regulator and browns it out. That's plausible. That's plausible.
Also, somebody points out you might just happen to have a switch set to user 1.
Yeah.
Like your arm switch is somehow switching off a user 1 mode. User 1 mode in the modes tab is typically a mode that switches off your VTX, user 1 or user 2. So just double check in the modes tab you don't have something set to user 1.
Yeah, agree. If your flight controller has a pit switch, you will usually have a user 1 mode. Red flashing means binding. There's no way to remotely activate binding on the 04. You have to push the button. Mahubaka, thank you for a $10 super chat. Just saying thanks for your videos. Thank you for your donation. Thanks for watching. Just built and flew my first quad yesterday, and it was a blast. Well, the fun just keeps coming. And the pain, but also the fun. America Elitem, I can't say those letters. America says, why isn't your video on the Phoenix MRID available? Thank you for a $2 super chat. I took that video down because there are issues with Betaflight and the Phoenix MRID that I felt meant that I didn't feel comfortable recommending that product anymore. The issues are not necessarily the Phoenix MRID's fault. They are at least somewhat Betaflight's fault, but the promise that it would work just like a GPS and you get full GPS functionality is not true. Betaflight doesn't support full functionality when using an MSP-based GPS, and there are currently remote ID modules out there like the Newbie Drone BID that simply that live up to the promise of acting like a standard GPS while still doing remote ID, and I think it's just a better choice. You guys just described the Justin Kruger effect. I'm not sure that's a joke. It's Dunning-Kruger. or if there's some more joke there. Thank you, Captain Bry, for $10. Oh, we earned $10 from Captain Bry for my positive critical thinking discussion. It's so upsetting to me. There are so many things in the world that are upsetting to me, and one of them is the disregard for the truth. The behaving as if what matters is which side you're on and what the people who are on your side say and what that means, like that outcomes matter, not truth. If we desire a certain outcome, we can only achieve it meaningfully by truth. But unfortunately, the truth is that lying about some things gets you certain outcomes that are good for some people and bad for other people. And that's the world we live in. Would your sub 250 kit be a good step up from a tiny whoop? I think it would be a great first build for somebody who was concerned about the 250 gram weight limit. Okay, we're getting close to the end of the stream. We got about 10 minutes left in the stream. People noticing that my stream is not at the normal time and also that I am not in my normal location. I am on the road. We got many questions still left in the queue. As a reminder, you can always email me, jb@joshuabardwell.com. If you would like to ask questions, I never get to all the questions on the stream. That's just not possible. But you can always email jb@joshuabardwell.com and I will get to your questions. Carson Black wants to know, what was the idea behind Betaflight making us import VTX tables? Betaflight making you import VTX tables. It's interesting that you put it that way. Yes, VTX tables are a pain in the butt, but go over to iNav. iNav, if you have a TBS Unified DP, it uses a new version of smart audio that has 8 power levels. But iNav 7.x only supports 5 power levels, which means that if you have iNav 7.x and a unified DP video transmitter, you cannot go to full power unless you disconnect smart audio and just push the button, which nobody wants to do that. The unified DP supports low band, a frequency band around 5.3 gigahertz. That is, by the way, completely illegal to use. Well, that's not entirely true. You should assume it's not legal to use because it probably isn't for you. But let's say you're one of the people who is in a place or under conditions where it is legal to use. iNav doesn't support low band. You cannot put a unified DP onto low band frequencies using iNav, period. Not even iNav 8. They just don't do it. Betaflight's VTX tables were designed to give you the freedom and give manufacturers the freedom to let their VTXs do whatever they want. That's the power of VTX tables. But it means that in order for it to work, you have to load the correct VTX table, and that is annoying. It bugs the shit out of me that iNav doesn't support VTX tables. And I do understand, before iNav dev, hypothetical iNav dev out there who is about to write me an annoyed message saying, don't you understand? I do understand. You guys don't want people to use your firmware to do things that are potentially violating regulations. I get that. I respect that. As someone who wants to do whatever the frick I want and you can't tell me no, it annoys me that you have put this restriction on me. However, you are probably making me more compliant with the rules because sometimes I'll have a video transmitter and I'll want to be on low band for whatever reason. And I'll just be like, no, just really quick do this. And you've stopped me from doing that. I have to flash Betaflight to do that. Good for you. What you're doing works. Do you think the SkyZone SteadyView X receiver is better than the Rapid Fire for long-range flying? Probably not, although I don't know for sure. The SkyZone had some issues with its SteadyView algorithm. Those issues have supposedly been fixed. I don't know for sure. The Rapid Fire is such a proven quantity, though, that if I had to bet, I would bet on the Rapid Fire, but I don't know for sure.
Can we,
hang on, don't interrupt me again. Here's this question from Fern that I was about to answer, and then you asked a question or made a comment, and then I didn't get back to it. So let me make sure, before you interrupt me again, let me get this question from Fern. Is it a good idea to use 1604 3800 kV motors instead of 1404 3800 kV motors on a 3-inch? I feel like my quad is underpowered. 249 grams. 249 grams, I don't think you will get much more power out of a 1604 versus a 1404. They're the same kV, so the motors will make about the same thrust, about the same RPM. Where you'll see a difference with the 1604 is, number one, the 1604 will probably be more responsive because it has more torque, so it will be easier to PID tune, and you'll get sharper PID tuning out of it. The other thing is the 1604 will likely have a higher top end. In other words, the 1404 will max out its torque and will not achieve as high an RPM, whereas the 1604 will achieve a slightly higher RPM. That would be my guess. Only bench testing would tell us for sure. I think that's worth doing. I think a lot of people would say that if you don't care about the 250 gram limit, that a 1404 is too small a motor for a high performance 3-inch, and certainly for a 3.5 inch. I would definitely consider going to 1604. However, I don't know if you're going to see like a radical change in the actual power. If it feels underpowered, I mean, 4S 3800 kV, that feels about right for a 3-inch. I don't know why it would feel underpowered. Maybe consider, like, are you using 3-blade props or 2-blade props? I don't know. Go ahead, Blenty. You're about to jump in.
I was going to tell you to read that question.
Oh, thank you. We're on the same page. Yeah, try using a higher pitch prop. And that higher pitch prop will also benefit from the 1604 motors. So definitely go to the 1604 motors, but also consider a higher pitch prop. I don't think you should go up in kV, though. I think your kV is fine. Plot twist. Thank you for $10, Joseph Dahari. 100 men versus 1 gorilla. Who's winning? No weapons allowed. I think the gorilla wins. This is the question that is intriguing the internet right now. I think the gorilla wins. Here's the thing. If you were to take 100, what's the word I'm going to use? Carcasses. Okay, let's not get community guidelines strike. If you were to take the carcass of 100 humans and drop them on the gorilla in a giant pile, like what would that weigh? 100? Wait, 20,000 pounds? I think it would crush the gorilla, is my point. But if you have 100 living sentient men, I don't see any way that they are going to beat the gorilla. Don't see it. Don't see it. They will not overwhelm the gorilla. I don't think they're going to do it. If they were trained in like medieval infantry tactics where they like link arms and form a line and then they surround the gorilla or something, like maybe if they were specifically trained for the purpose of overwhelming the gorilla at the expense of their own lives, potentially. You know, like bees surround a wasp and they vibrate and they overheat the wasp and maybe some of the bees die but they kill the wasp. Like if they were specifically trained to do that, maybe they have a chance. There is a tactic that lets the 100 men beat the gorilla through sheer mass, if nothing else. But like how is a human with no weapons going to inflict any injury on a gorilla? I don't see it.
Okay, so the problem with this question, as all questions like this, is the premise is not completely fleshed out, right?
No,
when you
of course.
Ask the question.
Of course.
So, is this a case where they have to fight? Because if it's not a case where they have to fight, then a gorilla chasing 100 men individually, each man, is
like
eventually
hunting
going
them
to wear
down?
the gorilla out. Yeah, it's going to wear the gorilla out. Like
Oh,
men
now
are
that's interesting. You're talking about like persistence hunting.
Yeah,
You're saying
we're tiring
well,
just like humans used to hunt. Is like, yeah, you're wearing the animal down by tracking it for 10
okay.
hours, but it's the opposite
So
where the gorilla's chasing you for an hour, and then the next guy is getting chased for an hour. You might lose 50 guys, but the gorilla's not going to be able to keep chasing everybody, right? That's and
so
then
the
the other one's
scenario
going to be far away.
the scenario I think most people that I imagine, I don't know, I should say most people, I shouldn't assume, is that you've like got an arena and there's 100 men and a gorilla in the arena, and the gorilla is going to attack the men. Like the gorilla is angry and is going to attack the men and vice versa. That's the scenario I imagine. I think the men lose every time there. Unless someone has developed guerrilla fighting tactics and the men are specifically trained in guerrilla fighting tactics. But like the idea that we're going to just dogpile the gorilla, I don't see it. Like even if you like jump on the gorilla's back, what are you going to do? You going to like gouge his eyes? The first time you poke him in the eye, he's going to reach over, he's going to rip your arm off. Like I feel like that's like not going to work well for you. If you're like the gorilla is in a field or in the jungle somewhere and there's 100 men and their goal is to take the gorilla down, the men win because they have like they're going to figure out ways, even if they're not allowed weapons, as you said, Blunty. They're going to do like persistence hunting. They're going to chase it. They're going to maneuver, you know, and some of them will get their arms ripped off, but eventually the gorilla will be worn down and will lose. No, I agree with you there. How strong is a... I looked this up recently because I talked about it with some friends. Newsweek says that a gorilla is 4 to 9 times stronger than a human. Bite force of 1,300 psi, can sprint 20 to 25 miles an hour over short distances. And how strong is a gorilla? You know, something like can lift 1,800 pounds. Gorilla are much stronger than humans. A gorilla can lift a huge amount of weight. Like they are only 300 to 500 pounds. They are only 300 to 500 pounds. They are way stronger than humans for their weight. So, anyway. We are coming to the end of the stream. Let me clear out the last of the super chats and then we will end the stream. Sunshine, thank you for $10. Truth is the first casualty of war, and the world seems to be at war these days. Thank you for trying to get us as close to the truth as possible. Vitaly Stockman, thank you for your donation. Thank you for your donation, Vitaly. Let's Logic, thank you for $2. Apologize to Blunty, that was rude as shit. What did I do that was rude to you, Blunty? What's Let's Logic talking about?
I think because you thought I was interrupting you to interrupt you, but I was interrupting you for the question. So
I was extremely polite in expressing that. I didn't want you to interrupt right now.
It's fine. Also, just so you know, Vitaly had a question that I queued as well.
Oh, where's Vitaly? Let's get his question then. Vitaly asks, on the topic of conformal coating, doesn't it decrease the life of components due to heat buildup? Maybe it slightly increases heat buildup, but I don't think by a significant amount, and I don't think it has a significant effect on the lifespan of the components. I don't see it. Like, shit on a drone gets hot. Shit on a drone has airflow. If it overheats, it just kind of, like the video transmitter overheats, it just shuts down. It doesn't hurt anything. The ESC gets hot all the time. As long as it doesn't get hot enough to melt the solder, it's fine. You know, these things get up to 100 degrees Celsius when they're soldered. They get super hot when they're soldered. So, like, electronics are fairly heat tolerant for the most part. I don't think the conformal coating is what's going to make the difference. That's my opinion. Mahogany FPV, last one, no more super chats. God, can you believe I said that? We're closing out the stream. I don't like it when super chats come in at the last minute after I've closed the stream and then your question gets missed and you're mad at me. Mahogany FPV says, when I do the ELRS Wi-Fi to connect to Betaflight configurator using a TCP trick, it only sends one page of info, but it does not update past that. Thank you for a $10 super chat, Mahogany. I don't have a fix for you there. I do know that feature is maybe not very thoroughly developed. Like it should work, but sometimes it doesn't work, but I don't have a fix for you. Sometimes if it's working, great. If it's not working, I'm not sure what you can do to make it work better. I did not say don't ever interrupt me again. Are you joking? I absolutely did not say that. I wouldn't talk to you like that, Plenty. Unless I was just being farcical. But I don't think I did that. So I don't know what I did say, but somebody go back in the stream and see what I said that you're misinterpreting as "don't ever interrupt me again." Anyway. Captain Bry, who is an ELRS dev, says, "Not very thoroughly developed." Seems accurate. Yeah.
All right, we got one more super chat that came in before you said.
I said, okay. I said, "Don't interrupt me again." What I said was, as I was about to ask this question, you interrupted me, and I lost track of the question, and I basically meant, "Don't interrupt me a second time as I'm trying to read this question, please, so that I don't get distracted again." I didn't mean, "Don't ever interrupt me again, you pleb."
Hey, let me give a hot tip to the chat. Let the guy who he's talking to handle it.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. Hey, Blunty, don't interrupt me again. You son of a bitch. You piece of shit. Oh. You should hear how it's going to be like Ellen DeGeneres. You know, the good news is, like, you got Ellen DeGeneres, and everybody thinks she's super nice, and then all her employees come out and say she's a total jerk, right? But me, you could probably assume that I'm, you know, basically just as much of a jerk off camera as I am on camera. I just cuss more. That's the only difference. How can I mount a fan on the air unit, controlling it by an aux channel? If you wanted to do that, you would go buy a thing called a pit switch, PIT-SWITCH. It's a little transistor, and you can switch it on and off with an aux channel. But why wouldn't you just have the fan run all the time and forget all that nonsense, right? Okay. That's going to do it, guys. That's going to do it for the stream. Yeah, sure. Why not?
Christians in the Discord says, "My ESC is blackened from heat and still works." Hey, it's not black from heat. I just want to be clear. Like, heat doesn't make things black. Black is typically from something exploding or blowing up or fire, putting soot onto the board. Yeah. So I just want to make sure we say that before we end. Okay.
Okay, great. Well, now that I've got my streaming situation sorted out, perhaps we will stream again later in the week. I don't know, no promises, but thank you guys for coming out, and keep an eye on the channel and the Discord server for future announcements. I'm going to be gone for one more week. I'm going to be in this hotel for one more week, back next week, and then guess what? Gone again for the 2 weeks following that. And then June is looking real wide open, for the record. Anyway, goodbye, everybody. Have a great day. Bye. Why am I in a hotel? Because I'm not at home. What, do you think I should just sleep on the street? Sheesh. I have to stop the stream.